Welcome to Shift, everyone. If this is your first time online or in person, we're glad to have you here. You can scan this QR code, fill out the Connect card, and we'll send you a free Starbucks gift card. Our generosity jars are due on October 23rd. Make sure you bring in your jars before that date so you can be a part of us helping pay down GRU bills and holiday meals. You can scan this QR code to donate online. 100% of it is going back to Gainesville. On the 22nd, we will be tabling at this year's Pride Festival. We're gonna need some of our people hanging out at the table throughout the day, goof off, festival stuff, hang out, and just have fun. You can scan this code, the one that's been up the entire time, and sign up for time slots that you're available. Then, October 30th is our next serve day. We won't be here at the building. We're gonna be meeting at the YMCA from 10 to noon. You might be asking, how do I sign up for this? If you're new, that's a great question. If you're not new, then you already should know the answer. You can scan this code, scroll down the page, click the link, and sign up. And that's all I have for today. No more announcements, so let's jump into week 2 of Virtue Signals.
When I was a kid, probably like 3rd grade-ish, all right, and don't ask me why I remember this, but I took one of my little brother's toys to school. I don't know why, and I don't remember which toy it was. He's 5 years younger than me, so it wasn't like it was, something that I would want normally, but I did. I took it to school, and then I got caught with it, playing with it, and the teacher took it from me, right? And she put it in the drawer with the stuff that they take from the kids. And and I was worried, not that she took the toy because I didn't care, but I didn't want her to tell my parents, right? Because then I would get in trouble. So I was like all day worried that she was going to tell my parents. The bus ride home, did she call my parents? And I don't know what I was afraid of. They're not going to throw me out of the house, but I was scared. And I got home and nobody said anything about it. So I was like, whew, got away with it. I didn't talk about it. I just kind of forgot it for almost the entire school year. All right. Then it was months later, and it was like one night, and I went upstairs, and I guess it was like I was telling my little brother good night. Now, my little brother, were 5 years apart, so he's in his 40s now, and the biggest jerk ever, in case he's watching it. But when he was little, he was little and cute and sweet and all the things. And I don't know what it was about that night, but like I went to give him a goodnight kiss or something, and I looked into his little cherub face, and then I realized I stole from my little brother. I took one of this innocent baby's little toys, and it just like this wave of grief of guilt just flooded over me, and I just started crying, and I went back into my room, and I'm like, it's not that big a deal. It's just one toy. Yeah, so many toys. But I couldn't stop, like that guilt, just that internal, guilt, that anxiety, and it just kept building and building, and I started crying, and I went downstairs to my parents, and I remember going down there, and I'm already crying, and my parents think something is like horribly wrong, and I just run to my mom, and I grab her, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I took a toy of my brother's, and I lost it at school, and I'm so sorry. And she's like, it's okay, it'll be fine. But once the dam broke, I just started confessing everything that I'd ever done. I mean, if you'd ever seen the Goonies, when they're going to put his hand in the blender, he just starts talking about everything. I was just like, just verbal vomit of confession all over my mom, and I'm ugly, crying and snot and shoulder shaking and stuff. And she got me to calm down, and moved on. And obviously, my brother and I, we were able to repair the relationship just fine and move forward in a new healing together. But I have told my wife many times that she never has to worry about me hiding anything from her, because I cannot hold a lie. I cannot deal with that internal anxiety. Listen, I know I'm a butthead, but I'm an honest one, okay? And not because I'm some holy or so good. It's just because I cannot handle that internal anxiety of like, I'm going to tell a lie over here, and did I tell somebody else? I just can't hold on to that. It would give me a heart attack. Like I would stress out, I'd have panic attacks. Today, what I want to do is we were walking through a series that we've called Virtue Signals. And Virtue Signals are like these surface level things that people love to put out on social media so that others can kind of like look at them as good people, right? you'll see a lot of time they're posting about certain things where they're virtue signaling. So what we wanted to do is that we wanted to take a look at some of these things that are typically those things and like dive into that. And so last week, we looked at honor. We looked at how do we honor each other in a culture where it's really easy to not, right? And we looked at the idea that when we honor people, we honor God. And when we dishonor people, we're actually taking the name of God in vain. That's what that actually means. Emptying them of their worth and emptying his name of his worth, right? And this week, we're going to look at the idea of integrity. So integrity is when your behavior matches your beliefs, right? Pretty simple. It's when what happens in public matches what is happening behind the scenes. And like the church loves to talk about personal sin all the time, right? Like we have built our reputation on talking about personal sin. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. And of course, I think everybody in here would agree that we should all live lives of integrity, right? Would anyone here or online actually argue that living outside of integrity makes life better? I don't think so. So let me give you some friendly advice. You will always get caught. You're always going to get caught. Don't think that you won't, all right? Nobody here is rich enough to get away with anything, okay? That's just the reality. It is. It's not a dog on people. None of us are the 1%, all right? They can do whatever they want, but that's not us. And you're going to get caught. And until you do get caught, you're going to worry about getting caught, right? So I just one verse, and then we're going to move on to something else. It's in Proverbs 10:9. It says this: whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. Now, this isn't a guarantee about life. Like if you walk integrity, nothing bad is ever going to happen. Instead, these are just like nuggets of wisdom. It's more like a guideline. It's like how to live life, right? Think about it like this. Have you ever tried living one way with a group of people, all right, and then living a different way? They're fine. They're just playing a game. Yeah, it's a game they're playing. They're having fun. For those online, it was just a bunch of kids screaming. So, yeah, they're like, what's he talking about? Have you ever tried living one way in front of one group of people and then tried living a different way in front of another group of people, right? Or like if you're like really trying to be something that you're actually not, and so you're kind of embellishing stories with this group and not this group, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, now what did I say about myself here and not there? It can be exhausting, right? It can be utterly exhausting. And so my advice, which I think is just easy to say, is just live a life of integrity, right? Jesus said it, let your yes be yes and your no be no. It's fairly simple, right? But what I want to do is I want to spend the majority of our time on something that I have never heard a church talk about. I've never heard anybody do a lesson on it or a teaching, and that is institutional integrity, all right? Maybe it shouldn't surprise me, but it does. Every stinking time. It is so crazy the amount of pushback that we get whenever we talk about the church owning its own crap. Like maybe it shouldn't, but it does every time. It's as if we haven't spent decades screaming at the top of our lungs for anybody within hearing distance to repent of their personal sins. And I think that it's far past time for the organization as the church to take some of its own medicine. So in Matthew's account of Jesus' life, we see in chapter 23, we see Jesus just straight up open a can on religious leaders, okay? And he saves his harshest and worst judgments for those that are called to lead his people. And in here, it's referred to as like the woe to you passage. Now, in this version, it doesn't say that. But look, this is just one verse, verse 15. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cross land and sea to make one convert, and then you turn that person into twice the child of hell. It's actually the word Gehenna. You yourselves are. Now, before we move any further, like we read that, and there's a negative connotation with teachers of religious law and Pharisees. That's me. I'm doing their job today. They're the pastors, the religious leaders. That's who we're talking about. And that's just one verse. Like, you should go back and read the entire passage, because he lays into them for having zero integrity. All right? And if Jesus showed up today, I think that he would have some more of those statements for his church. So some of you guys may be aware of what's happening locally. But this past week, there was a staff member at a large Gainesville church that was arrested for sexual assault. Now, what I'm getting ready to talk about is not in reaction to that, all right? This sermon series and all this stuff was planned months ago. We do our sermons with 2 other churches in town. We work together on this stuff. So they're talking about the same topic today, but we planned this back months ago. But it does underscore the importance of institutional integrity, specifically within the church. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to explore this idea by just sharing some of our story with you guys. One of the first things that I thought when I was walking through this is, like, you would think that a group of people that follow a dude that said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," would have zero issues with having integrity or truth, right? But how many times have we seen over the years pastors and leaders and churches lie, cover up truth, right? Gaslight victims, use non-disclosure agreements on their own members, or even hire. I've heard of churches do this too. They will hire firms to spin the media story for them. How many times have we read those stories? There's an entire podcast, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, dedicated to that. Oh, and just as a side note, I really wish people would stop saying that you weren't hurt by the church, you were hurt by people. Okay? Look at this post. Can you go ahead and show that? I hate this so much. I can't tell you how much I hate this. My wife sent this to me because there was some, I'm not going to go into it. If there was ever a time that I would curse from stage, this would be one of them. Okay? I have such strong emotions. This triggers me so much. I can't tell you. This is gaslighting 101 right here. Okay? Because here's the thing. When I stand in this official capacity as pastor, right? And I teach whatever to you from this thing that we call Scripture, there is an unwritten contract between us. One that says that you accept that I am a shepherd of the church or a leader of the church, right? And one that says that you are part of the flock or people of the church, right? So when pastors or leaders of the church abuse people within the church, they are abused by the church, because we stand up here and say, for good or bad, that we speak on behalf of God. And when somebody who says that they speak on behalf of God then abuses people, it's as if God is doing that himself. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. You can't say on one hand that we're an organization and then teach on the other that the church is a group of people. We're not a place, we're a people. How many times have we heard that? Either we are or we aren't. It can't be both at the same time. It can't be, but we're a people over here, and it can't be, well, we're an organization. We're blah, 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 to shield us from this. So stop it. Stop excusing atrocious behavior by the church by saying things like this, that you weren't hurt by the church, you weren't hurt by people. It's going to earn you a holy throat punch. I can't stand it. In the name of Jesus. I told you I have strong feelings about that stuff. It makes me sick. So, I once had an elder who tried to run us off from a church that we were part of. There were really sketchy things happening behind the scenes. And I don't mean things that were illegal, right? Or necessarily immoral. It was more about decisions, how decisions were being made, or the things that the church, like the direction the church was being pushed. It was like those things. This person was a very successful business person, and I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible. If anybody's watching this from the church that we're coming from, they know exactly who I'm speaking about, because we've had that conversation. But they were a very successful business person, and they were very much used to saying, this is what needs to happen, and you need to do these things. And in my interactions with them, they believe the same thing about the church. Like, I'm in charge, you do what I say, and this is what we're going to do, right? Those things that they were worried about, those things that they pushed, were constantly growing numbers, more butts in the seat, right? More money in the account. And all of those things were under the guise of, like, we're growing the kingdom, right? That's what it was all about. But behind the scenes, I can tell you, because I was there, behind the scenes, one of the goals that was to be on the list of America's 100 fastest growing churches. There's some Christian magazine, I think it's Christianity Today or somebody, I don't even remember, who puts that out yearly, or maybe they used to, I don't even know if they do anymore, about the fastest growing churches in the United States. And the goal was to always be on that list. We never made it, but that was the goal. And it's funny because now, like, people will ask us, well, like, well, how many people go to your church? And I'm like, I don't know, we don't count. I know how many seats are in the auditorium, but I don't count. So I know roughly, but I don't care. I do care. I'm not going to count, though. I'm just not going to do it. And so at the time, our lead pastor was completely unwilling to push back. Like, we had those conversations, and he just said, and the crazy thing is that I'm his age then. Like, the lead pastor of that church then is my age now. Like, we're the same age, and he was saying, I'm too old to fight this fight. What? Oh, then get out of the way, old man. Come on. But he was completely unwilling to fight this. And you guys know me. If I see a bear, right, I'm like, oh, look, a stick, poke, poke, right? That's just my personality. And I wasn't alone in that. I don't want to make it seem like I was some lone ranger fighting the good fight for Jesus. I wasn't alone. The other staff members were with me on this, and we weren't trying to usurp the lead pastor at all. I did not want his position at all. Didn't care about it. But I just wanted the church to be healthy. And so we started pushing back, and every time we had leaders meetings, elders and staff, they would come up with and say some really stupid stuff. And every time I would point out how stupid that stuff was. Eventually, they had enough of it. Behind the scenes, I was a student pastor at the time, so I did like middle school and high school and helped transition to college. But I was trying to transition out of that role into more of an adult ministry role. And so what we came up with was we were going to call it Connections Pastor, which is basically like if you were new to the church and wanted to get into small groups or serve or be part of any of the little extracurricular things that we did, I was the person that would help you do that. Like, I would help get you from A to B to C to D or wherever you wanted to go. That was going to be my role. And so the staff and I, we all sat down and we put this thing together so that we could kind of like fill in holes that we thought were needed. And then we presented this new job description to the elders. They took it and they did whatever they do behind, closed doors. And at the next meeting, they presented it back with their thoughts. And instead of what we had presented and saw what was needed, what they decided to do was they were going to turn that position into an actual second shift position. And so their idea was that I would work during the day. I would have like office hours. And then I would spend 2 to 3 hours every evening going and visiting families within the church, because that would be connections, right? And let me ask you a question. Who here wants a pastor showing up at their house at 7 o'clock in the evening to talk about churchy stuff? Any hands raised? No, because that sounds terrible. Nobody wants to do that. And they didn't want that either, because I asked the ones that had kids, I said, hey, do you want me to just swing by, let's say, Thursday night, right around 6:30, and we can sit around and talk about Jesus while you're trying to get the kids ready for bed? And no, of course they didn't want it, because it's a terrible idea. It was a terrible idea then. It's a terrible idea now. And I said no. I told them if I wanted to work if I wanted to work a second shift job, I would do it at McDonald's. So no one wants that. Because everybody's got their routine, right? Like you don't even have to have kids. After a long day of work, you do not want somebody showing up at your house. Hey, Pastor Joe here. Got Jesus with me. Nobody wants that. It sounds awful. So, but what they really wanted was for me to not want that, right? They created a job description that was so bad that I would say no. And they knew they had me because I had told them that I was done with student ministry. Like I just couldn't do it anymore. I was burnt out on it, and it wasn't fair to the church or the kids or to me. And so when I rejected that, they said, well, what are you going to do next then? Because you clearly can't be the student pastor. You said that. So what they did was they positioned it so that I couldn't accept this, and then I didn't have any job to go back to. So I had a couple of meetings with this particular head elder. And when this person that I was talking about, when they became the head elder, the direction of the church really became very businesslike. And think CEO versus like a spiritual leader, okay? That's where it was. And so I had this meeting with them, and we were sitting there, and they said to me with a straight face, really serious, that passion starts at 40 hours a week. Passion starts at 40 hours a week. And that they wanted me to be so passionate about doing the Lord's work that they wanted to come to me and tell me to go home because I was spending too much time away from my wife and children. That was what they envisioned. So it got to the point that I had to quit. The things that they were saying to me, the things that they were saying about my wife, if I'm being incredibly honest, I'm thankful that I was able to restrain myself the way that I was, because some of the things that were said to me did deserve a throat punch, but I didn't. And I'm not being like over the top to get a chuckle out of anybody. It was incredibly hurtful. It was bad. And one of my biggest regrets is that we left the church well. I don't know if you've ever heard that. Like they left well. Like there's no waves, which meant honestly that we lied. We just lied. We thought we were doing the right thing, right? That we weren't making waves. We didn't want to hurt the church, which is part of the gaslighting, which